Hey everybody, Nevin Gusak, your host of the Populist Patriot. Another live stream. So, you know me, anybody who knows me personally, or you can probably figure out from the content of my show, I enjoy reading about modern history, and that includes the political platforms and ideology of modern revolutionary and extremist movements. Got to have my handy dandy water here. And one of the things I came across it back in the 1990s when reading an old copy of Information Digest, which is a journal that was published by John Reese, who I think he's probably deceased by now, who was an expert in documenting the activities of extremist movements, communists and various and sundry assorted leftists, as well as neo-Nazis and neo-fascists. And he had a treatment on the neo-Nazi terrorist group called the Order, uh, also known as the Silent Brotherhood, which was led by Robert J. Matthews. Now, Robert J. Matthews was an example of a conservative. And he was a John Bircher who, I don't want to say like moved to the left, but he moved to a more collectivist position. He realized in his view that the Jewish elitists, along with the inferior races in the country, were causing the decline of the United States. And, he believed in, quote, big government as a result. He saw also that Reaganomics was destroying the country. In fact, many of the neo-Nazis did not like Ronald Reagan and his economic policies. And they gained traction as a result. They saw that, the family farms, the industrial plants in the United States were shutting down. They saw that greedy corporate employers were importing American workers, including non-white ones, into the American labor market, which were depressing the wages of other naturalized Americans of all races and colors and religions and genders. That they saw that corporate America, which they felt was led around the nose by the Jews, by wealthy Jewish Wall Streeters, was ruining the country. And again, I look at the evidence. Robert J. Matthews, the head of the Order, which is a neo-Nazi terrorist group, very ruthless one, I might add. He issued a declaration of war dated on November 25th, 1984. And it's kind of self-explanatory, and it talks about the increasing non-white immigration into the United States. But he also brought upon something very interesting. And it caught my eye because there's a common theme with extremists. And even though the neo-Nazi terrorist group, the Order, I don't like them. I consider them enemies of the country because they want to replace even my style of authoritative government, which still leaves a lot of room for political and economic liberalism. They want to create a scientific style totalitarian state where they literally control everything. All you have to do is read the book, The Turner Diaries by Dr. William Pierce. I mean, that's the real author. The pseudonym was Kevin, what was it? Something McDonald or whatever. He wrote it under a pseudonym. All you have to do is read that, and that's what the Order wanted to do. They wanted to bring about a style of government as described in the Turner Diaries. And that basically, if you want to summarize the view of the style of government as expounded in visualized by Dr. Pierce in his book, The Turner Diaries, envision the combination of Pol Pot's style of communism in Cambodia combined with the most radical of the SS leadership. That's the type of government that was basically installed in there. Not a very pretty sight. But again, often enough, extremists bring up legitimate grievances and problems that were papered over, including at the time by the Reagan administration and the more his loyalists within the Congress and the Republican and conservative grassroots. According to them, it was morning in America. The reality is America was becoming fast a huge dung heap under Reagan, economically, politically, and socially. So Robert J. Matthews, founder of the Order, this neo-Nazi terrorist group, in his declaration of war wrote on November 25th, 1984, "All about us, the land is dying. Our cities swarm with dusky hordes." There's, of course, your racism there. "The water is rancid and the air is rank." That's Reagan was starting to deregulate the environmental protection controls, for better or for worse. And that's, the things you're getting. "Our farms are being seized by usurious leeches, and our people are being forced off the land." Well, that's true. That's true. Starting under Carter and then under Reagan, you had the deregulation of the banks, and you had policies, credit policies, loan policies that were stacked against the family farmers. And during that time period, you had agribusiness giants like Continental Grain and Archer Daniels Midland and others that really, really, really were squeezing the family farmer out of existence. And there was a lot of those mergers and acquisitions, which continue to this day in farming. So he wasn't wrong. The capitalists and communists picked gleefully at our bones, while the vile hook-nosed masters of usury, that obviously means the Jews, orchestrate our destruction. Well, let me tell you something. These, quote, hook-nosed masters of usury aren't just the Jews. You also have white Anglo-Saxon Protestant and other non-WASP but yet Caucasian Wall Streeters that are doing the same shit. It's not just a Jewish thing. There are also plenty of people that are non-Jewish that are shitting on the American population then as they are now. I mean, the individuals that populated the Reagan administration that led financial deregulation, like John Shad over at the Securities and Exchange Commission, as far as I know, were not Jewish. Not all of them are Jewish. Some of them were, and indeed were very vile and usurious. I mean, let's leave out the hook nose thing, because there are Jews throughout the period that oppose the depredation of Reaganism, of Reaganomics. You look at Bernie Sanders to this day. You look at Alan Donaldson of the blog Reality Check. He was formerly involved with the U.S. Business and Industry Council. I know him personally, met him personally once. He's Jewish, very critical of the Wall Street economy, as he termed the casino economy back when he wrote for the U.S. Business and Industry Council's online publications. You take a look at Aaron Feuerstein, the former CEO of Malden Mills. He was at loggerheads with the financial lords of Wall Street too as well. And he was Jewish. In fact, used the very best in Jewish tradition to justify his very good business practices. So just because you're Jewish does not mean you're automatically programmed to be a total shithead when it comes to just ripping people off. So what else does he write? What is to become of our children in a land such as this? Yet still our people sleep. Every day the rich tighten the chains that lay heavy upon our people. How pitiful the white working class has become. Where is the brave Aryan yeoman so quick to smite the tyrant's hand? They close the factories, the mills, the mines, and ship our jobs overseas. Yet our people do not awaken. They send an army of agents into our midst to steal from our pockets and enforce their rule. Our forefathers under King George knew freedom more than we. Yet still our people sleep. To those who awaken, the reality is grim. John Singer awoke. Concerned over rampant drugs, homosexuality, and miscegenation in public schools, he tried to teach his children at home. He was a stout Aryan yeoman who loved his family dearly. Government agents shot him in the back. Gordon Call awoke. After 4 decades of submission to the tyranny of the IRS, he tried to resist. He was a stout Aryan yeoman who loved his family dearly. Government agents shot him in the back. Arthur L. Kirk awoke. For 3 generations, his family farmed the land the usurious banker was trying to steal. Kinsman Kirk tried to resist. He was a stout Aryan yeoman who loved his family dearly. Government agents shot him in his back. So there's a lot more I can read, but you kind of get the point. Now, was the Order a numerically large neo-Nazi terrorist group? No, but there were extremists that were gaining um, numbers and popularity, particularly in the Midwest. You had the uh, quote unquote former communist Lyndon LaRouche and his movement. They were making gains, as I describe in my book, Turning the Page, the volume two. The LaRouche movement were making some serious gains in Democratic primaries, even in some statewide races, including for state office officials, state of positions in state government. I mean, they didn't win for the most part, but they were gaining some, for an extremist movement, some pretty decent percentages. And there were a few smattering of some neo-Nazi candidates that ran mostly as Democrats, some of them as Republicans, and they were clearly getting double digits starting under the Carter years. You had the increase in the appeal of groups like Liberty Lobby, which was a crypto neo-Nazi movement masquerading as a sort of populist and nationalist think tank organization. And it had its wing known as the Populist Party, which ran candidates in the 1984 and 1988 elections. And they were getting in the tens of thousands of voters. And maybe that's not millions, but that's something to start with. And always remember, what did Lenin say? Give me a handful of revolutionaries and I will turn the world upside down. I mean, don't forget, Lenin and the Bolsheviks in a country of 91 million, I believe, in 1917, in the eve that they took power in November 1917, they had 200,000 revolutionaries. And Reagan's America really was getting hollowed out, and there was some serious discontent, much of it unorganized, but also portions of it organized. And in my opinion, if Reagan didn't become president, I think a lot of these groups wouldn't have existed, or they would have been even more marginal than they were. And that's what happened. But Reagan was destroying everything. Carter started to set some things in stone with some of the deregulation and the free trade, and then the open borders. And then Reagan put it on steroids, and his successors continued to do the same thing too. So, that's, just wanted to talk about that. Another penny in the jar shows that Reaganism is causing discontent. And, of course, minus the white racialism of Robert J. Matthews, and basically his belief in totalitarian forms of racial collectivism as a form of government and economic organizations. I mean, there are kernels of truth in what Robert Matthews was saying about the closure of the steel mills, the destruction of family farms, and the social decay in the cities. I mean, these are unaddressed problems. These are really unaddressed problems in these countries. And the extremist groups continue to grow in numbers. I talked about Democratic Socialists of America. We're talking 70,000 people. That's 70,000 too many people. Just like the tens of thousands that voted for LaRouche in presidential campaigns in 1980 and 1984. And the tens of thousands, over 100K that voted for the Populist Party of 1984 and 1988. And they were crypto racist parties. And there are things I agree with the Populist Party when I've read their platforms, but they are for white racial nationalism, and I suspect them of authoritarianism. I mean, especially since in 1988 they ran David Duke, who was a neo-Nazi. So that's my take on that. Another penny in the jar, my war against Reaganism. And yeah, I have a war against collectivist extremism on the one hand, but this channel, we're making war against Reaganism and neoliberalism, because the only way to save this country from the forces of extremism, as well as preserve the nation for generations in perpetuity, we got to destroy neoliberalism. We got to destroy the Tea Party ideology of extreme corporate-led individualism, and we got to support a positive form of nationalism and populism that establishes a new aristocracy based on morality and talent and the right intentions that will govern actually for the will of the people for the most part, as well as maintaining our national security. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Got more live streams on the way.